marching toward digital purgatory. Over the coming hours, we'll speak to global tech leaders on how they're driving this change and the upsides and downsides of the digital age. Bloomberg's Eric Schatzker joins us to speak with Ruth Porat, CFO of Alphabet and Google.
I'm Eric Schatzker, an editor-at-large here at Bloomberg in New York City, and with me today is Ruth Porat, the Chief Financial Officer at Alphabet. Ruth, it's great to see you.
It's great to be with you, and greetings from the Googleplex.
Ruth, I don't really have to say it, but I'm going to anyway. The pandemic has massively accelerated the digitization of industry and of the workplace. And I want to know, how is Google taking advantage of this golden opportunity?
Oh, you're absolutely right. There has been a dramatic acceleration in the digital transformation. Trends that were playing out over a number of years have really been telescoped in, and you can see it in commerce, you can see it in content, entertainment, education, you can see it in telehealth, you can see it even in the way we're having this conference today and the way we all work. And I think one of the important points for everyone is that we don't see the clock turning back. We do see that these trends will continue to endure. And I think it's really important for each one of us to consider how we can embrace digital tools and technology to support both revenue opportunities and efficiencies in our own business. So, for example, and to your question, when we look at small, medium businesses, which are the backbone of economies, what we saw during the pandemic is 1 in 3 small businesses said they would not have survived if they did not have digital skills, because it enabled them to immediately pivot and find their customers where they were in the online world, to get them the information they needed to talk about things like delivery or changed hours. And so these digital skills were absolutely imperative for survival. If you look at governments and businesses large and small, one of the opportunities is you saw with this surge in the move to digital activity that there was also a surge in online customer support inquiries. But at the same time, people were taking their own customer support teams home. And so what we were implementing is a contactless customer support system that was powered by AI. And so with incoming inquiries in multiple languages, we could do triage and answer most of the questions, but then provide support manually where needed. And so this is just a tremendous operating uplift for companies. So the main thing is there are many ways, both on the revenue upside and on efficiencies, that are going to be increasingly critical, and everybody needs to look at opportunities to embrace it.
Ruth, you're absolutely right that the clock isn't turning back. As the lockdowns and the restrictions end here in the United States, and sadly, so very slowly elsewhere, everybody wants to get back to normal. But the new normal isn't going to be the same as the old normal. What strike you as the biggest, most significant changes in the way that companies do business and rely on technology that will end up being permanent and not temporary?
Well, I think there are 2 parts to your question. One is, how do we each think about what the work environment is? And at Google, what we've said is we do believe in the value of space, bringing people together for collaboration, for training, for coaching, and there's a productivity element. But there's also a productivity benefit for people working from home. So we're looking at a hybrid work environment. And very much to your question, technology will play a critical part of that. One of the reasons it was relatively seamless for us to pivot to work from home is because we benefit from Google Workspace, which are collaborative tools, collaborative docs. We're all in the doc together, presentations, our ability to communicate with one another. And technology is going to continue to be one of the cornerstones of what is a hybrid work environment. How does it work? If we want to be a magnet for talent and have a work environment that has this hybrid mix, we need to be able to have technology solutions and tools that allow what we're calling technology equity, so that if somebody's in the room or not in the room, you can still have the kind of discussions that are needed. So yes, absolutely, technology will be a key part of those solutions moving forward.
Every CFO like you, and every CEO for that matter, is trying to figure out how to strike the right balance when it comes to things like real estate and the tools that you provide your employees to be able to function in this kind of hybridized work environment. Share with me your thoughts on that front.
So there are plenty of elements of it. When you talk about real estate and how we're using real estate, we're basically doing the floor plan so that if we're bringing people into the office, it's for collaboration and productivity. So what we're doing is building spaces that can move much more flexibly and nimbly so that when you're in the office, you're in teams. As I said, technology is a key part of this. So we've created things that we're looking at, like campfire circles, where you have video screens, video monitors in a circle around the room so that people have equal access if they're unable to come in to the office. And so one of the key elements will continue to be, how do we use these tools, both video and as well as all of the Google Workspace docs, in order to enable productivity and collaboration globally.
Ruth, the race, I would call it a race, to deepen relationships with customers and consumers is a fiercely competitive one. What is Google doing strategically or tactically, perhaps, that is different from what your competitors, the Microsofts, the Amazons, and the Facebooks are doing that you think ultimately is going to play to your advantage?
Well, I think each of us has our unique differentiators. One of the main things that we're focused on is how can we stay close to our users and customers and provide them with the tools and skills that they need to be most effective as the world continues to accelerate in this digital transformation. And our ability to leverage differentiated AI has been helpful for all of our customers, for users. People don't even appreciate how often they're using AI in every day. So for those of you who are traveling around the world and opening up now to more travels, when you look at natural language translation, that benefits from AI. When you're asking the question of how do I get to find a store near me that's offering the services or products I want, again, we benefit from AI. So on the user side, really critical. On the enterprise side, what we're really excited about is the investments and opportunity in our cloud business. And our cloud business really is benefiting from extraordinary data analytics, the AI behind that, and then we've brought in talent to focus on very industry-specific solutions. So, for example, in financial services, my old home, one of the key pain points was always the manual intensity around risk and risk analytics. We can leverage things like Know Your Customer or anti-money laundering with AI and data tools. So those are important, and we go to customers and it's like, here's how we can help either with revenue upside or efficiencies leveraging the tools that we have. Same across retailers. They're looking at how can they ensure that they've got the best supply chain management when we've all lived through what we've seen. And so again, the benefit of AI. So we're looking across the board. I would say the other element of it is how can we be most supportive to the communities in which we operate? And part of that is ensuring that we're working around the globe to provide digital skills training to people so that everyone can participate in this rapid digital transformation.
You mentioned cloud computing. People who pay attention to such things, Ruth, would note that at least as measured by revenue, let's call it, or the size of your business, Google's cloud computing business is in third place behind Amazon and behind Microsoft. Do you see this digital acceleration as the key to closing that gap?
I think it's an assist. I think that we have, we're really proud of the momentum in the business that we had even prior to COVID. And clearly what companies are seeing going through COVID is the digital acceleration and the uplift they get, the ability to leverage the meaningful investments that we and others have made to provide the tools and the compute capacity that's needed. So, for us, I think our differentiator, as I said, is not just the data and analytics and the AI. We also provide the ability to work in a multi-cloud environment, which we're increasingly hearing customers want, both for risk management and regulatory reasons, but as well so that they can benefit from the best of solutions anywhere. And our team around the globe is focused on what are the key solutions that are needed by industry vertical. We're excited about the strength of our compute capacity. We've been building that out over decades. We actually have the greenest cloud out there, so customers working with us are able to benefit from the fact that we have been carbon neutral since '07 and are well on our way to powering 100% of our data centers with renewable energy by 2030. And we're really excited about how we're building out around the globe. We announced in Qatar in particular a center of excellence. We have a data center that's going to support all of the activity, the growing activity that we're seeing in the Middle East and Africa. So that enables people to run their workloads locally. And we're similarly supporting a digital skills training effort with Qatar Center of Excellence so that people can get the skills they need to participate in this cloud upside.
Ruth, I know how important it is to you that this recovery out of the pandemic be an inclusive one that creates high-value jobs. So much of the national dialogue right now is about inequality, the inequality exposed by the pandemic. Yet if the past is any guide, it's so easy to be cynical that anything is going to change for the better. Do you think this time is different? And if so, why?
It has to be. Just the depth of pain that we saw in this pandemic was unprecedented. And what you clearly saw is the pandemic put a harsh spotlight on the implications with inequity in society. You saw the most marginalized, the impact on jobs, on health, survival rates, on education, and it's just unacceptable. And I think for all of us, if you want to have sustainable growth, it must be inclusive growth. It's not just the right thing to do, but it supports economic growth for the long term. And so one of the areas that we've been very focused on, as I've already noted, is ensuring that everyone has equal access to the opportunities for jobs of the future, the jobs of today and the future. And those are going to be digital based. So we started a digital skills program, digital skills training program a number of years ago. It's called Grow with Google. And what's extraordinary about it is with no prior experience, within 3 to 6 months, we can train you in things like IT support or user experience or data analytics. And what we've done over the years is we started this program so that we could train people for our own IT program. And then we said, you know, if we make a certificate that's portable to other companies, it's going to be more useful to more people. And then we said, well, let's build a consortium so that it's actually accepted by more companies. We now have over 130 companies in the consortium. And we're really excited about the pace of this, the take-up of it. We think it's one of the critical ways to increase access to opportunity. In the Middle East, we've trained over 1.7 million people so far and businesses, and we're committed to continuing this digital skills training program. I've personally opened some of our centers, and you just see it's profound when people see they have a future. They have the access to jobs of the future.
Ruth, one element of the inequality and unfairness debate is tax policy. And as you're well aware, Google is one of the multinationals targeted by the G7 deal, I should say, or at least agreement on a 15% minimum tax. Is 15% enough to prompt a change, in the way that Google structures its business for tax purposes?
Well, I think importantly, Alphabet is already one of the largest taxpayers in the US, and we have been paying taxes at the OECD average rate for about the past 10 years. A couple of years ago, we did restructure our international tax structure, so all of our international IP is back in the US. And so we've been looking at the OECD proposal and are very supportive of it. We actually think it's critical to have an international framework that is durable and believe that the OECD approach really provides that type of anchor that's needed. And the two pillars to reapportion tax revenues across more countries and to provide a global minimum, we're supportive of, because we think without something that is durable like that, we're going to continue to see a race to the bottom. So we're very supportive of this, and we're already paying taxes, and as I said, in line with the OECD average.
As many people know, Google was sued for antitrust violations in the final months of the Trump administration. Ruth, has the government's posture changed since Joe Biden took office?
Look, I think overall there's a focus on any of the businesses that continue to do really well here. In our view is we want to be very engaged and make sure that we're working closely with regulators to address any of the questions and issues that they may have. Our fundamental point is that people come to Google because they want to, not because they have to, and we are very focused on engaging on all of these issues.
Has that contentious regulatory environment had an impact on companies' business or its ability to make acquisitions?
Our approach, I think, is let our legal and policy teams really focus on engagement on all of these issues and continue to have engineers innovating to deliver for users, for businesses, for governments, for the communities around the globe. And that's how we've continued to say, what is it that we can be doing? What more can we be doing? As I've said, many times on areas like privacy, we very much share the view of regulators, users, that privacy is sacrosanct. We were early to create privacy tools, believe in national privacy legislation in the U.S., and continue to up what we're doing around issues like privacy. Same with security. So there are plenty of areas where you will continue to see us upping what we're doing, because we're trying to make sure we're delivering for users, for communities, for governments.
Ruth, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Great to see you. Look forward to getting you out to the Googleplex.
If you're joining us on the Qatar Economic Forum portal today and you need technical support, please email us at support@qef2021.com. We also really want you to chat with us on social media, so please follow us on Twitter @Bloomberg Live and use our hashtag Qatar Economic Forum. Our next session is Business and Behavior Transformed.
Hello there. I'm Haslinda Ahmed of Bloomberg Television. The pandemic has upended our lives potentially forever, forcing us to reassess how we live, rethink the way we work, and reframe how to thrive in business. So far, we've adapted well, but how about the long term? Let's get insights, perspectives. Sunil Mittal is founder and chairman of Bharti Enterprises, a telecom giant in India, which started as a small manufacturer of bicycle parts back in the 1970s, but it now operates in 18 countries with more than 400 million customers. Mr. Mittal, thank you so much for your time. Good to have you with us.
Haslinda, it's a pleasure to be with you on this first Qatar Economic Forum.
First off, Mr. Mittal, what's your playbook post-pandemic? What will be the legacy, you think, of this pandemic on global commerce?
I think first and foremost is the bringing alive back the broken down global system of trade and investments. I think the last few years before the pandemic, we saw nation states becoming more self-centered. And this pandemic, to my mind, has brought to fore the need to collaborate and to open oneself and nations to a larger grand ambition of keeping the world safe and together.
So how are you rethinking your business now, given the scenario you've just painted?
Well, very clearly, digital acceleration has forced the hand of almost every major corporate entity in the world. And more and more digital tools and mediums are being used to do things for the companies itself within the systems, and importantly, how best to serve the customers in a more efficient and faster way. And in my own opinion, companies that are not going to adopt to the digital ways of life are going to start to fall behind. And this is something that is engaging all the boards very seriously now.
So you touch on technology. It is a double-edged sword. Connectivity has become even more important now than ever before. You're trialing the 5G network now. Can 5G be the answer to bridging inequality in countries like India, where the pandemic has even deepened that divide?
Well, in my nearly 20 years of life in telecommunications, I have never seen a technology which is really at the cutting edge, going to serve the remote and rural needs first and foremost. 5G is more for industrial applications, autonomous cars, management of drones, robotic surgeries. So I think we'll have to find other ways. And thankfully, there is technology at hand to do that. More and more radio networks going deeper, but still places which can't be served by radio, we will have to go from space to serve them.
So what are Bharti's own plans to serve the people? What are your plans on that front?
Well, we are firing on all cylinders, connecting more and more homes on fiber so that the shift of traffic that has happened from offices to homes is well served, and we are doing well at that. More spread of terrestrial radio networks, going more and more deeper into rural areas. And finally, we have now taken a very big, bold bet with OneWeb, which is going to be one of the first 2 LEO constellations in space, serving every square inch of the world, whether it's Earth, oceans, mountains, deserts, jungles, anywhere. You will have a radio signal to serve the people who are not connected to internet. And do keep in mind, half of the world is still offline. And given the progress this world has made, I think it's a matter of shame that we are still having so many people which are left behind.
Let's pick up on OneWeb. It is a mini satellite firm. It's one of the most exciting projects you've undertaken, you've embarked on in recent times. Talk to us about the business case for Bharti. What goals, what targets have you set for yourself?
Well, just imagine a telecom network beaming out of space with 648 satellites moving at 25,000 kilometers an hour speed around the globe and covering the entire globe in 1 minute and 19 seconds, 1 hour and 19 minutes. You can imagine the power that it has in its hands. With very high speed, low latency bandwidth, which was missing from the earlier satellites, we will now create the magic of serving those who remain unconnected. Bharti is leading this charge along with the British government. Eutelsat, the European company, which has the French government involved, is also a part of it. So is SoftBank. And we are delighted to be nearing our vision of starting to provide services soon in the coming year.
So how will it complement Bharti's digital outreach, you think?
Well, just imagine when I go to a customer, he's got many rural installations, depots, warehouses, factories, which need connectivity. And he has got offices in Mumbai and major cities. So now you offer one single solution from Bharti to say, here we are serving your end-to-end needs, wherever you are in the world, wherever you are, whether it's deserts or, Himalayas, we will serve you. And then there are needs of defense authorities, maritime, aviation. I'm sure you've experienced the poor internet services in aircrafts. I think we are talking about those days behind us now, once LEO constellation starts to beam into aircrafts.
Mr. Mittal, will it be a game changer for you? You've talked about how just within the telecom space in India, there are now 2.5 players, no longer 3. Will this be a game changer for Bharti?
Well, I think there are 2 separate sensations here. One is really India, where from 12 operators, we are down to really 2.5 now. Will India go down to 2? My own view is I'll be tragic. India is a very large country. It deserves to have 3 private sector players. And I hope we end up with that situation. But as far as Airtel, my own company, is concerned, it is gaining ground. It has gained market share. It's in a very solid position. In Africa, we have now strengthened our company. It's doing extremely well. So we remain very steadfast in our ambitions. But what OneWeb does is really sit on top of that ambition to serve the areas that we could have never imagined that we'll be able to serve. So it's really a complement of a technology that is coming through.
I want to touch on the consumer behavior. Bharti is across sectors, telecom, insurance, food, education, real estate. Has anything changed fundamentally for the consumer, and in particular, the 1 billion consumers in India, where everybody, the likes of Amazon, Google, Facebook, all wanting a slice of that huge pie?
Well, indeed, a lot has changed. Given that there's been a deceleration in economic activities, the world has gone minus 5.1%. The only way to quickly bring the economic momentum back is, as I said, through digital medium. We saw within 2 weeks, 250 million students moved online in China. The same is happening everywhere else in the world. We really need to, support the digital vision. And our Prime Minister, who has had digital from day one when he assumed office as his mission, one of the 4 pillars, has been driving this agenda for the nation. And I'm glad we today have Fintech coming through mobile phones. We have healthcare services coming through mobile phones, the identification coming through mobile phones. And importantly, education type of services which are essential. And that is where I would say Qatar is very highly focused. I served on the Education Above All Foundation of Sheikh Moza. So education is one of the most important needs for India today. We have to educate our 250 million young children who are between the age of 6 and 16. And if we keep on getting disrupted in running our schools and universities, the only way is through digital medium. Amazon, Google, Facebook, all these companies are coming and supporting India's vision towards that medium, ensuring there are tools available, there are mediums of digital connectivity, and importantly, there are enough entrepreneurial ecosystem developing around these digital ecosystems that they are able to serve the customer needs.
Mr. Mittal, you said before that those who are here yesterday are not here today. Those who are here today may not be here tomorrow, and yourself included. What new businesses might your group be looking at to ensure that you stay relevant tomorrow?
Yeah, I still maintain that. I mean, a lot of people believe that they are here forever. The fact is, you keep on looking at history, and you will realize many of those companies who never thought they will disappear have actually gone off the face of the business charts. So yes, one is always conscious. You need to build companies for the future. You need to build companies for the next generations. And in that order, we keep on reinventing ourselves, moving from 2G to 3G and very quickly to 4G, and now moving on to 5G, and more importantly, moving straight into space now. So we have to stay relevant. Things are changing faster than what we saw a decade back. And if we don't remain alert and alive, we will be history.
Big plans, Mr. Mittal, looking at new investors coming into either Bharti Airtel or your holding company. Anything we should know about?
Well, a lot of people knock at our doors. We refuse more capital than what we accept. We have been blessed with great, significant investors. Qatar Foundation Endowment made its largest investment ever in India in Bharti Airtel. Qatar, Investment Authority, QIA, has invested in Africa with us. Singtel, Temasek, GIC, and the whole globe's, top charts of investors are with us in our companies. And I can tell you that we get investments easily. Bharti raised $12 billion in the last 24 months during this difficult period when the industry was going through crisis. So I remain confident. Shall we raise more money in the near term? Well, you can never say never, but right now there's nothing on the other.
Mr. Mittal, thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure. Sunil Mittal, founder and chairman of Bharti Enterprises, we thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
The pandemic brought global business to a halt and forced business leaders everywhere to think on their feet. Joining me now is one of Turkey's most notable businessmen, Ferit Şahenk, chairman of Doge Group. It's lovely to see you here in person in Doha. Such a pleasure. Tell us a little bit about how your restaurants, let's start there, were particularly impacted by the pandemic. I've had the privilege of going to some of them, but you must have had a blow.
Well, a time came where in a matter of 12 hours, we had to close down 191 restaurants.
Wow.
All around the world, from Los Angeles to Hong Kong, to Europe, to Middle East, all our locations. And we had to send about 10,000 of our colleagues, who I call them my family members, home. But we kept them at home busy using technology.
How?
We created 360-degree synergy projects. We brought different teams, not from only restaurant group that we have, from our hotels, from our automotive, from our retail. So it created a culture of being together in the group, feeling the same problem across the group together. So people didn't feel alone at home. We created a call center for my family, I call them. If they have a legal problem, social problem, psychological problem, medical problem that they cannot overcome, they call us. We are there for them. This is how we are. We are a partly professional, partly entrepreneur group. So still that ownership feeling that we look after each other is there.
You also came up with the concept, or building on the concept rather, of cloud kitchens. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, it is actually quite prominent around the world, but you've really built
Definitely. To be very open with you, in certain times when the things are normal, you think about doing things, you start working. But this pandemic from A to Z across the globe in all businesses speeded up the things that we were thinking. Actually, we had to immediately do them.
It was an accelerant.
And mankind, humankind, when we give time to think, innovate, and work together, we overcome things. And we immediately created, as a first solution, in a couple of our kitchens around the world, we put a couple of our brands there, our chefs there, and the growing logistic systems all around the world, I should say, enabled us to be still with our clients, with our guests, delivering the restaurant experience to home. So they still had their dream of the Doge hospitality experience at home.
How are you able to manage quality control, bringing all the different chefs into one kitchen? And was that a challenge for you?
Well, the thing is, hospitality people are very proud people. And they love to see the smile, and they like to feel the appreciation of their guests. So given that culture, coupled with our chefs who love to work, they don't like to stay at home. So they worked in the kitchens together with other brands that the group has in the other part of the world. And we started doing this as a first initiative. But the second came where the real technological, it's a little bit engineering, software engineering, process engineering. Our chefs gave the formulas. We did the streamlining of the processes, and it became like a factory. But with the usage of digital technology, delivery systems, logistics, we started doing, believe me, the similar quality. And as we speak, we are doing the first, as I said, couple of chefs in a hub kitchens. In a couple of months, we're going to start actually what it's done in the Middle East and in some in United States, technological cloud kitchens, also in Turkey.
So how is this coalescing around a data-driven culture, I would say is really what you've harnessed here, going to change your business going forward?
Well, the real competition and the fascination of our business is to get to know our guests. We don't call customer, we call guests, a member of Doge guests. We have to know them so much without disturbing their privacy, so we can do surprises for them. We can make them more appreciate having the experience of dining in our restaurants or staying in our hotels, special than our other competition.
How do you see the economic recovery in Turkey?
Well, Turkey also took her equal share of the pandemic, to be honest with you. But the importance of the export business and the diversification across the world enabled Turkey's exports still continue. And the support that the government gave to the workers, to the businesses, allowed us to go through this pandemic as better as we could be, I should say. And now we have good news. July 1st on, Turkey is opening everything. And if you don't mind, through the Bloomberg screens, I want to thank once more, not only in Turkey, but all around the world, all the healthcare workers. I think they have done a great job. They took care of us 24 hours, 25 hours a day. They were thinking about human health.
And there are heroes.
Yes.
The other thing I want to get to is you also have a media business.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering how that was impacted because filming had to stop. You know, how did you innovate around that? And, you know, every now and then I do watch some Turkish soap operas.
Super.
In all this free time I have.
Super. I hope you're going to be watching more. We are creating.
But you know, the
stuff.
Nigerian soap operas might be a little better.
Well, we do some exchange. You see, this is the thing. You know, this pandemic reminded us how world is still a small global village. We are together. We are interconnected. And travel is going to continue. People are going to start traveling again. We are going to be interested in each other's cultures. And hospitality will be a very big tool for the connectiveness of the world. I may not understand the Nigerian language, but I will for sure watch it with the subtitle, but listening the real language. But what we did in media is we started as the digital age is a reality now, digitalization. We created a platform. It's called Puhu. So we have all our content there, just like around the world, like the Netflixes and many other brands. We are doing that. Our news, our music, everything is online now. So yes, the way business is done will change, not may change, will change, but still people will listen music, people will watch content.
How have you changed?
I was able to get connected with my family, with the people that I work with. In 1.5 years, more than ever, I connected with more than 10,000 of my family members, my colleagues, through WebEx and Teams and so forth. Right. I did many webinars. I listened to the Z generation in the company. Being a 57-year-old young entrepreneur, we have to know our future clients. And also, the culture of the company has to change. And I told them, this is your company. Change it the way you like it. And I have to here to do that change.
And finally, what worries you most when you look at the economic landscape ahead?
What worries me most is really the culture that we have created in these hard times in our company may loosen again. I'm praying that we still keep on this change of culture in the group, which the ideas come from the field, not from the top, because field is the one who's closer to the customer. They know the customer. They are the ones who create the business. And I'm going to do my best with my team to continue this. Otherwise, worries, there can be many worries.
Right.
But one thing I gained in this whole pandemic, to be very honest with you, I got to know my daughter more.
Oh, that's
I
so lovely.
spent so much time with her.
Oh, how old is she?
She's 23.
Oh,
she just finished Babson College, and she's working in a cloud kitchen now.
Of course she is.
She's getting her training. And soon I think she's going to be working for one of the top 4 advisory companies.
What did you learn about her that you didn't know before, very quickly?
She knows a lot about life that I can learn from her. And that she missed me over the years.
Börje Chahank, Chairman of Doge Group. Thank you so much for talking to us at the Qatar Economic Forum. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome. I'm Malika Kapoor, Deputy Global Editor of Bloomberg Live. Now, the past year has changed the way we work and live. But as pockets of the world begin to re-emerge from the pandemic, the question is, has the way we work changed forever, or are we simply going to go back to the way things used to be? The views of my next guests could influence the direction we take, so please join me in welcoming N. Chandrasekaran, Chairman of Tata Sons, India's largest conglomerate, and Mark Dixon, founder and CEO of IWG, and a pioneer, an early pioneer of the shared office concept. Gentlemen, welcome. Chandra, I want to begin with you. And the Tata Group, it's a massive company. You have 750,000 employees around the world, 150 nationalities. Most of your staff, most of your workforce has been working from home this past year. What does the word office mean to a Tata employee today?
I think, Malika, we have seen a lot of different things happen in the last 1 year. And many of our companies have enabled people to work from home, but also we have industrial companies where people have come into work in the factories. I think the office is still a very important place. To my mind, it will signify two important things going forward. A place where collaboration really happens, and also it will become a place where there'll be a lot of social engagements. And I don't think that we will be in this current mode forever, nor will we go back to the old model. We'll end up somewhere in between. It is being called as hybrid. We can talk about that.
The hybrid model, yes. Now, Mark, you were an early pioneer of the shared office space concept. You founded your company, then known as Regis, almost 30 years ago. Now, it's easy to say this move away from the office has been triggered by the pandemic, but do you think this shift was inevitable?
Well, look, the shift was happening anyway. In 2019, in early 2020, we were doing our best trading ever as more and more companies were moving towards hybrid working then. And hybrid working is really companies just adopting modern technology, a new way to work, much more flexible, much less costly, much better for the environment. They were doing it anyway. The pandemic just accelerated adoption. The entire world, more or less, of white-collar workers had a forced trial in this new way of working. And for most, productivity was maintained, in some cases improved, and companies realized that they could still continue working in a hybrid way. So again, I agree with Chandra's comments that it will go somewhere in the middle. It goes to hybrid. The office still has a very important place, but other types of workplace will supplement it. And, in effect, overall, there will be less occupation of core office space, and people working closer to where they live and working much more over digital technologies than being crowded together in single buildings.
Chandra, at the beginning of the pandemic, you spoke about a 25-25 strategy, saying that by 2025, you'll have only about a quarter of TCS, Tata Consultancy Systems, people in office. But you've also said you want people back in the office as soon as it's safe for them to do so. So what is the plan for the Tata Group going forward in terms of the split between people working from home or people back in the office?
I think one thing is clear, that we will go to a hybrid model. What we mean by hybrid will evolve. Our thesis is that still many people will continue to work from home. That doesn't mean that there will be a standard set of people who will always work from home and the others will come to work. At any point in time, whether it is a 25% people or the number gets adjusted plus or minus, I don't know. But what is important is the people who will form teams will have to be enabled to come to work together. So it's not like a random choice that people will make, where anyone will decide I'll come these 2 days, somebody else will decide I'll come once in a fortnight. It will be more designed and structured, where people will continue to work in this hybrid model, but at the same time, we will be able to address collaboration benefits. We'll be able to address teams working together, ideating together whenever they have to be together, and also make the office a place for social engagement, which is going to become very, very important. So I think we will move in that direction, but it will settle somewhere around about what I told you.
So this is interesting to me. How do you find the balance? Because employees, we know for a large part, want that flexibility. They want to be able to work from home or from a shared office space a couple of times a week. At the same time, as you pointed out, it's essential to be in the office and meet your team members for collaboration. As an employer, how do you find that balance? Where's that happy medium?
See, I think the flexibility will be there. Clearly, since the direction has been accelerated due to the pandemic, that flexibility will be there. But at the same time, I will tell you, today, if you ask anyone, would you like to work from home forever? The answer will be no. People are wanting to come back to work. In India, it's still not opened up fully. So we are getting constant calls. Can we come into work? Can we do this meeting in office? You had 3 meetings in video, but actually would like to do an ideation session. Can we come into work? And these kind of questions keep coming. So I think people will be happy to come into work, and at the same time will have the flexibility to work from home. So that hybrid, I don't think will be a difficult thing to get adjusted to. But what is important is how do you put the processes in place. See, for example, when TCS enabled 97-98% of the people to work from home within 3 weeks, it is not about just giving them computers. It's about the processes. It's about the security. It's about ensuring productivity. It's about quality control. How does the whole workflow changes? There are a whole lot of things that have to be done. But similarly, when you go to this future model, what is important is what kind of meetings you do it in office and which teams come together. How do we put some framework around it? But I think people will get adjusted. In fact, they will like it. Is what I feel. I don't think it's a difficult thing to do.
Mark, as Chandra pointed out, people are wanting to come back to office. They're asking him, can we come into office to have an ideation meeting? I know your company has had one of the strongest years ever in terms of demand. Who are the people who are wanting to come into office, who are wanting to rent your office spaces? Is it companies? Is it individuals? Where's this demand coming from? Or is it certain pockets of the world where the demand to come back into office is stronger?
Well, look, I think first it's important to make a point, to just clear up a point here. So hybrid working in most countries it's a combination of either working from home, working from a local office, or working from a company's head office. The key enemy, if you like, or the problem in the equation is commuting. It's the time it takes for an individual to leave their home and arrive at a place of work. And I fully agree with Chandra and what the employees are saying. And we've got the same issue with our own customer base. And we have more than 7 million users who want to come into the office, but they want to come in more often to an office that's local to where they live and to avoid commuting. So, the beneficiary overall will be the individuals that don't have to commute as much, who save time, who save money. It's better for the environment. And a company needs less fixed space. The companies that are making the change, in answer to your question, are lots of small companies, obviously, and growing companies, but the major change for us and where we've seen a step change in demand has been amongst large corporations like NTT, where we signed up 300,000 users, Standard Chartered Bank, 95,000 users, and a whole range of other companies. We've signed up around 1 million new members, and we have another 1 million in the pipeline, as companies are looking to change from having all fixed space to having less fixed space, and then lots of satellites where people can drop in just about anywhere and go into an office and work. And as Chandra said, they can choose on an app where's the most convenient place to get together and do some work, and a group of people get together and do that work. And so it's a new way of working. Instead of having everyone go to a fixed space, it's having people work where it's convenient and get together where it's convenient. And that could be the head office of the company, or it could be a lot of satellite offices that are just out there, it's sort of on a platform, which, our platform has 3,500 buildings that people can drop into. But it does take a lot of curation, and it changes. And again, as Chandra said, it sort of changes the way companies need to manage the workforce, need to communicate with the workforce. It's a new way of working, but done well, it's much more efficient and much lower cost. And it's what people want.
Mark, you've talked about, staying local and people wanting to avoid the commute, which I totally understand. You've also talked about the 15-minute city where everything you need, your residence, your office, your entertainment, your medical supplies, everything is within 15 minutes of where you live. Do you see that taking place? Is that really practical going forward? Is that going to be the new reality?
It will become more and more the new reality. And that's, basically the elephant in the room is the environment. Once COVID hopefully moves away stage right in the middle of the stage, you're going to see the environment. And you've seen the G7 this past week. The environment's the major thing. Everyone's focused on it. And every large company is focused on reducing their footprint, reducing their impact on the planet. And sort of adoption of hybrid working and the 15-minute city. And a 15-minute city is about basically creating a much more local market. And it's a much more convenient market. It's a much more local market. It's happening in countries like France, where it's quite well advanced. And it will become it'd be something that your kids are going to ask about. Are you involved in this? What are you doing for the planet? And getting things more local, which is what the 15-minute city is about, helps a great deal to reducing commuting miles, whether that's food or whether that's people. It can make a huge difference in the long term, and it will become a thing of the future. By the way, it's all facilitated by digital platforms. The 15-minute city can work and is working because the world has become digital, and will become more digital in the future. It's the great facilitator.
Technology is a great facilitator, but Chandra, I want to ask you, the 15-minute city, it seems ideal to us in many parts of the world, but I have to say, I'm a little skeptical to see how a 15-minute city could work out in a place like Mumbai, where you can't get from any point to any point in 15 minutes, given the traffic in Mumbai. But do you think a 15-minute city is achievable in a city like Mumbai, even though you are, with TCS, Tata Consultancy Systems, this is part of your job to provide the seamless digital transformation for companies? Can this 15-minute city work in India?
Let me try to explain it slightly differently, Malika. I think if you see what the pandemic has done is fundamentally accelerated the digital adoption, at least by a decade. It's not about only making the technology available. Yes, the technology has been made available, this whole collaborative set of tools the investments in these tools and the adoption of these tools has kind of skyrocketed. But the more important thing is everyone, whether rich or poor, educated or uneducated, whoever it is, people living in urban area or rural area, everyone has adopted digital. So digital has become a mainstream. So people are very comfortable doing things over a video like we are doing this session currently. The second part is the hybrid model, if it has to work. Let's not think of it as only office and home. There is going to be a concept of a third place. I think you may want to call it a satellite office, or you may call it whatever. I call it a third place. And wherever large communities live, there will be this third place where people can come into and then sign up to their network. Because the technology in terms of network, efficiency, productivity, privacy, all those security, all those things will get addressed. And the level of collaboration will continue to increase. So there is a role for a third place. That third place will certainly reduce the travel time. And you see that 15 minutes as more a metaphor, and there will be an impact in every part of the world due to this concept. So I really think that the future of work will evolve, and we will evolve for the better. We will try to get the best of both worlds. The best of having digital technologies and all these interactions that we are having now versus the physical interactions. And every company will innovate, every company will push. So we will learn from each other, and at some point in time, we'll get to a model where we are not only seeing productivity, but also have a situation where people feel they are sufficiently communicating with people, sufficiently getting together with people, sufficiently they are engaged socially. All those things will happen. But this is a journey. This is not like January 1st, 2022 or 1st of June, 2022.
Yeah, it is a process, as we're all figuring out. Mark, what does this mean for the future of cities? You know, traditionally, every major city has had the office district, a downtown area. As we move away from that to a city which has third space options, etc., what does this mean for what a city will look like going forward?
Well, just coming back to your example of Mumbai, which I've experienced on many occasions. We have quite a big business in India.
Yeah.
The Mumbai, if you were planning it from scratch, you'd make into a whole series of 15-minute cities. It's such a big place, big population. So it is basically neighborhoods that have all the facilities within them. But what you're going to see is a change. You know, one of the principal changes that will come as a result of this move to hybrid working and towards things being more local will be a change in the geographic makeup of countries, in particular in Western Europe and in particular in the United States. It is already happening there, where the geography gets flattened out more, and basically a company can employ people anywhere in the UK, France, or the United States, in fact, anywhere in the world, to do a particular task. They don't have to be in proximity to a central office building, which was the restriction in the past. So it opens up hiring. It opens up jobs for many, many more people who can work remotely some of the time. And it must be, you must be noted that to work successfully, you have to have engagement with your teams, with your people. So working remote is fine some of the time, but people need to come in and collaborate also quite a lot of the time in order to, to get the best out of those people for the company. But the geography will change. Provincial towns, rural towns across the world will benefit, subject to them having good internet and a good digital platform, those you're going to see a renaissance of small towns as more people decide to get quality of life. They can work locally, so why not do it? Cities are fine if you're young. They're less attractive for many as they get families and so on, and are expensive.
Chandra, I wanted to ask you, does greater flexibility in the workplace, will it lead to greater diversity for companies as well? Will it open up a chance for people who couldn't traditionally go to offices and be a part of the workforce? Will they now have that opportunity to be part of the workforce?
Certainly, I think that's a big positive. I expect will happen. You know the numbers in India. I think many educated women are unable to work. Only 23% of women who could be potentially working are working because of all the issues that we know. The commuting, the social infrastructure, the care help that is needed, and the lack of it, and so on and so forth. I think the flexibility in the working styles will certainly bring more women into workforce. That's for sure. And I think we should not miss this opportunity. We should kind of tie it all together because that is an issue we need to address anyway. It's not only good for the GDP and growth, but also it's the right thing to do. And I think it's an enabler. I think there are 4 or 5 big enablers here. One is the evolution of the technology, which is kind of making this kind of a work possible, and the technology will get better and better. And with 5G, I think even the video quality, the interaction quality will all become much, much better. Second thing, I think Mark mentioned it multiple times, the whole sustainability angle. The third thing is people have pretty much realized that whatever they could do outside, they could do it from home, whether it is shopping, whether it is education, whether it is consulting a doctor, or everything is happening today from home. So the question will always be, why can't I do it from where I am? And the fourth one is time. I think if I remember traveling to California from here for a 40-minute meeting, I think things like that now may not happen because people will accept. Both sides will accept that it's a waste of time. Let's try and do it through a digital medium. So there are multiple factors, and it will make much better economic sense because productivity will go up, and also more people will be able to come into workforce.
Now, one of the positives is greater diversity, but one of the downsides of working from home for a prolonged period of time is mental health. And we have seen that affect large swathes of the population globally over the last year. Mark, I want to come to you with that. How do you see the new model, a hybrid model, supporting mental health?
Well, look, I think it comes back to, and I've said this a few times, it's not about only working from home. I think a company that only has people working from home, if they were to do that, and there will be some jobs that are suited to a work from home situation. In particular, as Chandra said, if you can bring a lot more women into the workplace if they don't have to commute, if they can choose their hours. And technology allows them to work from home. But if people are working from home, you have to put a lot more effort into communication, making them feel involved, making them feel part of a team. You have to use the technology to bring people together. But better than that, if you can, is to actually bring people together. So, the cities overall still have a purpose to actually bring people together. They're generally convenient places to bring people together, either for collaboration or congratulation. But companies will have to focus on this because having a distributed workforce may be better for the environment, it may be cheaper, and it may be what people want, but it will involve companies having to adapt the way they operate to focus much more on the individual. What they save, they need to reinvest some of that in bringing people together and communicating well with them.
Great. Mark, thank you so much for your time. Chandra, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure to talk to you both, and I look forward to a hybrid model and to see what the future holds in the way we work. Thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Chang, host and executive producer of Bloomberg Technology. Thank you so much for joining us. We are joined today by Aziz Aluthman Fakhru, managing director of Ooredoo Group, joining us from Doha itself, and Börje Ekholm from Connecticut, the president and CEO of Ericsson Group. Thank you both so much for joining us. It's great to have you. I want to start by talking about the pandemic and the world going on lockdown, which meant that we all needed to get online. Bring us behind the scene at your companies. Were the networks ready? Aziz, I'll start with you.
I remember on the first day of lockdown in Qatar, if you look at the first weekend, actually data usage surged by 75% over the previous weekend. This was staggering. Luckily, we were ready. We've always had a data-centric strategy, a data leadership strategy, and the investments we've done in over the past years to ensure that our networks were future-proofed, ensure that we could deliver a consistent and seamless experience to our customers. And this also thanks to the help of our partners like Ericsson.
And Börje, how would you describe, that moment when the world went on lockdown and suddenly everyone needed to use their phones, everyone needed to connect online?
It was I would label it now afterwards, a big experiment. So we migrated very quickly to having 85,000 or 85%, almost 90% working from home almost overnight. And what we saw was that the society, and we as one of them, really depended on the networks. So the communication networks and the mobile networks are truly critical national infrastructure. And just like Aziz said, we saw a very sharp uptick in network traffic overall. In countries with a strong fixed network, it was absorbed to a large extent in the fixed networks. But with countries with mobile networks, it's actually been covering in the mobile networks. But we've seen a change in traffic also, which I think is the interesting part. One is we see much bigger uplink needs, so the need for upload, which indicates an increased usage of collaboration tools like Teams, for example. But we also see a big need for streaming. So video streaming has gone up dramatically. We've also seen that a shift in the structure of where data is consumed. It used to be consumed much more around the office. It was consumed on public transportation or on between work and home. But now it's migrated towards the home areas. So it's a big change. And I do think that we are going to not revert back to the old normal pre-pandemic. We're more going to find something that's in between where we are today, mostly remote, to something where we combine the hybrid model, call it combining the home and office working. But the networks overall are performing very, very well.
So the big question, of course, is how much of this change, this massive acceleration of technology that we've seen over the last year, how much of this change is permanent? And I'm curious, Aziz, how much has the acceleration of technology that we've seen over the last 18 months changed the cities, the countries where you operate?
It changed the whole social fabric. We tend to operate in countries which are generally prepaid countries, which are under-penetrated on the banking side. And this is where telecom providers, the connectivity we provide, the social services we provide actually came to light. We didn't just provide allow families to stay in touch. We didn't just allow businesses to continue working from stay at home. We also allowed to democratize mobile financial services. When you have a cash-based economy with a lockdown in place, it's very hard for people actually to use, to buy, to find services. Thanks to mobile networks and thanks to mobile financial services, we were able to actually build these reflexes in the society. And once someone has experimented the ease of a digital economy, they tend not to go back. We also supported a lot of governments in allowing them to deploy education through online systems. These systems will remain. They'll probably be used to reach out to population in rural area, which generally were undercovered by the governments in general. So I think a lot of the reflexes and the benefits that were gained through the enhanced connectivity and how it came to light with the pandemic are there to stay.
Now, I think it would help our audience for both of you to sort of share more about your relationship and how the partnership and the collaboration between operators and providers enhances the customer experience. Börje, could you talk a little bit about that?
We collaborate on, like with Ooredoo Group, it's one of our key partners around the world, and we're partners in many markets around the world. And for us, it's actually the very close way of working is, of course, to provide support on the regular technology demands. But it's interesting, the closer we work with demanding customers like Ooredoo, the more that also impacts our roadmaps. So that starts to be a feedback loop for us that's very critical in order to develop the next generation technology. So for example, by working closely with leading customers, and here again I use Ooredoo as an example, we are actually able to provide better solutions by providing those requirements into our R&D. So we've had collaborations with Ooredoo, including for the World Cup 2022. And, you know, even if it's an event that is 2022, just like the athletes, we started to practice way earlier. So for us, we started the deployment in 2018, 2019. And that is driving our need or our technology, starting to showcase the new type of applications that you can see in a 5G-enabled stadium. So again, think about instant replay from multiple angles. Think about other type of exciting opportunities to enjoy the game you will see using 5G. That's all driven because of the close collaboration with partners like Ooredoo.
Let's talk about the World Cup. Since you brought that up, Aziz, this is a huge moment for Qatar, and obviously the stadium is going to be, I don't know, maybe the most connected stadium in history. How are you doing it? How are you bringing that to life?
Look, first, I believe that the Qatar World Cup 2022 will probably be the best World Cup ever. It also will be the first 5G World Cup. It will be the first event of that side which will be fully covered with 5G technology, and that allows a myriad of applications. And we're very proud as Ooredoo, in partnership with Ericsson, to showcase what 5G can bring to this type of event and what it can bring actually to the world. From one side, you're looking at connected stadium, which will allow to enhance security and crowd flow management within the stadiums. To another side, you'll be allowed to provide enhanced, enriched media experience to fans on the spot with VR, augmented reality. At the same time, you'll be able to provide a lot of rich media across the world thanks to the connectivity of 5G. To give you an example, in 2019 we hosted the Emir Cup, the final game, in a stadium which was fully 5G enabled. During that event, there was 6 terabytes of data which was uploaded from telephone and streamed from telephone just from the stadium back onto the internet. Just to give you an idea, 6 terabytes, we're talking about the equivalent of 1,300 full high definition, 2 hours long movie simultaneously uploaded from mobile devices in one single stadium. This is unprecedented.
Wow. That's absolutely incredible. So then what does that mean for the fan experience? What are they going to be able to do in the stands that they wouldn't be able to do in a different stadium? Aziz?
So they will have access to live statistics, live data, instant replay, but they'll also give them access to embed this experience in their social field, in their social media, and instantly share it across the world. Today, you can't really do that to that extent and to that level.
So let's talk about then what's happening outside the stadium, because connectivity is now considered as vital as food, as vital as water. Not everyone has it, and the pandemic made that very clear. Börje, what role can you and Ericsson play in bridging that digital divide beyond the World Cup?
I'm happy you bring it up, because this is one of the key challenges we as a world face. The digital divide, I think, is going to be defining who has and who hasn't, in a way. So if we believe in social inclusion around the world, I do believe connectivity is going to be critical. And here we are doing a couple of things. We have, for example, our signature program is Connect to Learn, where we have connected a lot of schools, teachers around the world, and several 100,000 of students in order to help them enhance the learning within ICT. But there are much more we can do. So we launched actually just recently here a program together with UNICEF that we're trying to connect unconnected schools around the world with the ambition to connect all schools by 2030. Here we believe that's really critical, not only to connect the schools, but we also know that when you connect schools, you improve learning and you allow the whole community to start to enjoy connectivity. This is one key challenge where I think we as companies, but I also believe governments around the world needs to engage in to ensure that everyone has equal access to a good internet connectivity. We all sit now in fairly wealthy countries, Qatar at the clear top. But the interesting thing is, even in developed countries like the United States, there are many without a proper internet connectivity. So the digital divide, often thought of as remote part of Africa or Asia, for example, without connectivity. But it actually applies in very developed countries like the US and large parts of Europe as well. So we have a major challenge.
Indeed. Connectivity is so vital that it can also help solve some of the world's biggest problems. And Aziz, I wonder, what are the problems that you see because of the lack of connectivity, and what kind of problems can access to it solve, whether it is helping with an economic recovery, fighting climate change, financial and educational inclusion?
So I think connectivity, what the crisis has shown, the pandemic has shown, is how vital the connectivity was to the recovery of the world. It's what allowed business to rebound, actually businesses to continue. It also what allowed social networks when you were in isolation to carry on to work, so family units to carry on working. When we look at the geographies we operate in, for instance, there's one example, I touched on it previously, is we tend to operate in geographies which are significantly underbanked, and very simple services that we all take for granted, like the use of a credit card, the use of a debit card, access to the digital economy, is not present in these countries. Us as operators, and with Ooredoo Mobile Money and the partnerships we have with MoneyGram, we actually democratize at a very efficient and a very low cost the use of mobile financial service, and that provides to this population a gateway to the digital economy. It allows them to purchase. It also allows them to do remittance. A lot of the countries we operate them are or net providers of remittances or net receivers of remittances. Given access to this population, a seamless and very cost-effective way to remit is extremely important.
So the goal, of course, is to then get not just connectivity, but 5G to everyone, not just the inside of the World Cup. Börje, talk to us about the challenges, the future of getting there, and what that world looks like when it happens?
What we see is that 5G is actually the fastest scaling mobile technology so far. And we see that scale at a very high pace. The interesting thing with 5G connectivity is clearly that it's going to drive a completely new ecosystem. And I'd like to draw your attention to just what happened with 4G. When 4G was rolled out globally, that drove the creation of the app economy. And pretty much today, you can travel anywhere in the world and enjoy the app economy. But the job creation around the app economy happened in the countries that rolled out 4G the fastest and first. That was China and that was North America. We think it's going to be the same thing in 5G, but this time it touches even broader part of society. As he's touched upon that, what we see, and this has happened almost in every crisis in the past, it accelerates already ongoing transformations. And in this case, digitalization. So what we see in the 5G world is the creation of a completely new ecosystem, leveraging the capabilities of 5G. So here we're already seeing how medicine, for example, telemedicine is changing. It's growing very, very quickly. We see other type of streaming services growing fast, not to exclude e-commerce growing extraordinarily fast, almost by 75% per year now, and also driven by the mobile ecosystem. And financial services, as he's mentioned that as well, it's growing very fast, and especially in regions that actually are now skipping one generation, skipping the credit cards, for example, moving straight into mobile money. And I do believe when we have a ubiquitous coverage of 5G, we will see a number of new applications we can't think of today.
Aziz, what are the most exciting uses of 5G that you see in the future for the people and the countries that you serve?
So we've already deployed 5G, of course, in Qatar. We've deployed it in 4 countries. We're actually did a test right now in Indonesia, which is geographically and subscriber base our biggest market. 5G for us is a game changer on the consumer side, but it's also a game changer on the industrial and B2B side. The very high speed and low latency which 5G allows a myriad of use cases in the industrial space where automation and artificial intelligence is enabled. As Börje mentioned, we're just at the starting point of 5G, and a bit like when 4G kicked off, we had to wait in a way for the iPhone and for people to actually leverage as much as possible the technology before it really built up. We're at that stage in 5G. I think within the next 3-4 years, the number of use cases for 5G are currently unimaginable today because the full ecosystem is not there yet. But we're working very hard to ensure that that ecosystem is delivered.
Meantime, as we close, connectivity is obviously incredibly important, but comes with vulnerability. And as we've seen with the rise in hack attacks, in ransomware attacks, our companies, our networks are under threat. Börje, how do you balance connecting the world, but at the same time making sure that those connections are protected?
You're absolutely right. Cybersecurity is at the front and center today. And with just the recent attacks we've seen in the US, for example, highlights the need to take a very holistic view on security. And here I think we are promoting a concept that we call the trusted stack. So it includes looking at the total stack. So it includes looking at the standards, it includes looking at the products, the operating procedures, etc., and take that overall view of your security. And that has to be done by governments, by countries, in order to make sure that the network is truly secure. I think this is one of the key challenges, and I worry that we're trivializing this question by focusing on only some parts of that trusted stack, whereas we need to look at the total. And 5G is actually the most secure standard we've had so far, with security built in from the beginning.
Aziz, would you echo that? in closing, in terms of how to find that balance? If we get to 5G, we're more secure.
I fully agree. As the world gets more connected, relying on cloud-based threats are emerging, and new technologies like 5G, which were conceived from day one with these strengths in mind, are much more secure. I do believe that it's a full chain. The users also have to build in habits on how to behave correctly. Us as telecom operators, we can also provide the first layer of security for businesses, for end consumers, and for big enterprises and government. But every layer of the pace has to be embedded with cybersecurity.
All right. Well, with that, thank you for sharing what you're doing to make the world more connected, but also keep it protected, as well as Aziz Aluthman Fakhru of Ooredoo and Börje Ekholm of Ericsson. Appreciate you both joining us today. Thank you.
I'm Anis Cranney in Dubai. Joining me now for the next conversation is the new chairman of Swiss Re. It is Sergio Motti. And the title of our panel, Sergio, is Counting the Cost of Mega Hacks. So you're now the chair of a pretty big reinsurance company. I just want you to set the stage for our global audience about your sense of the scale of cyber risk that there is out there, the cost of the mega hack. Do we really understand the scale of risk?
Well, I think more and more, it's almost inevitable that societies, companies, and the political world understand the necessity to tackle this even more and more increasing risk. And in that sense, I think that the awareness is there. If all the actions necessary to fix the problem are in place, that's a separate topic. But in a world that is becoming more and more digitalized, it's quite critical to address this aspect of the risk posed by technology, which is coming with a lot of opportunities, but of course, as I say, also risks.
Well, let's just talk about the boardroom. Obviously, having sat as a CEO for a long period of time, now as a chairman, do you get a sense that boards globally are cognizant enough of cyber risk?
Well, look, first of all, let's start with what management has to do and boards have to do. I think that if you look at, in general, according to many surveys, but also from my own experience, the topic of cyber risk has taken a big part of the agenda when we talk about operational risks within any organization. I think nowadays it's probably only second to the pandemic risk and the foreseeable probably potential slowdown in the economies. But from a operational standpoint of view, it's very important to think about cyber risk as a way to protect yourself, not only against the possibility of not being able to serve your clients, but also think about the reputational risk associated with being affected by a cyber attack. So management and boards more and more are thinking about those topics. Of course, the learning curve is very steep. Not always you have a situation where board members and in general management are fully aware of the complexities, but particularly when you talk about large organizations, there is increased awareness of the topic. Maybe there is a need to make sure that SMEs and other players are coming up to the same level of awareness.
And obviously the work from home scenario is now part of our lives. How we work, how that blended model develops is, I suppose, anybody's guess really at the moment. But that digitization has accelerated in 2020 through 2021 in the work from home. And that brings a new level of risk. Are your customers now coming to you with new inquiries? Is the scale of investigation about work from home and the risks associated with it top of the agenda?
Well, yes, of course, this is, as I mentioned, more and more relevant topic we discuss with clients and we can see in our own life. Well, of course, COVID has accelerated the digital transformation, and many people working from home has created opportunities, but also has created the awareness by not only the institutions that are giving those tools to their employees to serve clients, but also by criminals to exploit opportunities. And so there is an awareness, there is a necessity to protect yourself, not only through pure insurance, but also through very elementary practices in terms of how to have the right hygiene around your environment in how you operate.
When we look at the world, we're constantly trying to assess. You said that obviously COVID is there and a mega hack is up there in the echelons of 1, 2, 3 of risks. I look at Lloyd's, they are insuring, as it were, the backstop fund, the central fund. So they're insuring themselves against a pretty big event. What does that say to you about the risk of a major global, I suppose, tail risk?
Well, in general, I can't really comment about the specific, but nowadays, risks like in the cyberspace, for example, are very, very hard to predict. If you think about the cyber risk industry for an insurance company, we estimate that Swiss Re that is about 7 billion of premium per annum. In historical terms, this was a benign business where you would get decent returns. Nowadays, I would say probably the situation has become more problematic. We do expect the insurance pool for cyber risk to increase by threefold, almost to 20 billion by 2025. But of course, all those risks cannot always be fully covered, and therefore there is a necessity for all the players in the market to cover tail risks. And by the way, this solution you mentioned is a good example on how the system is able to come up with innovative solutions to diversify risks among different players.
But it's obviously got consequences as well about writing a profitable book at Swiss Re. As you sit into the chair now, how much of your time is taken up with the board talking about perhaps the risk models, how you adapt and how you change in this environment about writing a profitable book?
Well, a lot across the board in all risks, not only on cyber. You need to take, not only an historical view of patterns of different data that were contributing in a very important way to the modeling of risks and therefore premiums. You need to take a forward-looking view that is also changing constantly. Cyber, as we mentioned, is one example, but if you think of climate change and other aspects of our economy and societies, there is more and more a necessity to really recalibrate the weighting of historical data versus forward-looking data in any model.
When I think of cyber attacks, mega attacks, this year alone, Sergio, my own home country, the health service in Ireland, held to ransom. The Colonial Pipeline on the eastern states of the United States held to ransom. Now, these are sort of very visual perceptions of the mega attack. Do you think we've had some wake-up calls globally this year about what could go wrong?
Yes, usually, look, the cyber risk and claims industry, some people estimate brings claims for around $1 trillion a year, which is probably on the conservative side if you think about the fact that according to some data, only 100 billion of that would come from Germany, so maybe it's even too low. So, but to answer your question, I think that every time phenomenon is touching the lives of people out there. For example, you talk about a pipeline that is affecting oil prices and or potentially in the future power supply. It increases not only the attention of consumer and people, but also of politicians, and therefore we become more and more aware that the need of governments to think about policies that are allowing the private and the public sector to cooperate on how to tackle those risks is very important. It's all about infrastructure, and I'm not surprised to see the U.S. Talking about those kind of issues as a matter of national security. So you will see more and more governments also stepping in as a consequence of this kind of attacks.
I suppose that takes us back to the conversation between Putin and Biden, really resetting the cyber agenda, one could say. When you saw that making the headlines, Sergio, what does that say to you about that government reset or that statehood reset on risk?
Well, look, the issue is without going into conspiracy theories about how those things work, it's a matter of fact that there are criminals out there searching for opportunities, or just maybe even only people that they are not just criminal in terms of trying to extract economic value, people who have an ideology or terrorism as a matter of their targets. So I think that it's not surprising at all that when we talk about security and geopolitics, cyber and this kind of risk are coming up in the agenda. At the end of the day, technology is another way to conduct, potentially create damages to economies and countries. So I think it's actually, in that sense, maybe the issue that we saw with the colonial was a good wake-up call that allowed us at a relatively modest price to get even more attention to the topic.
Sergio Motti, Swiss Re Chairman, thank you very much for joining us today at the Qatar Economic Forum. We'll see you soon. Sergio Motti.
I'm Carol Massa, Bloomberg TV and Radio, and I'm delighted to have with me Michael Chertoff. He is co-founder and executive chairman of the Chertoff Group, and of course, former secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, and that was during the George W. Bush administration. Michael, it is so great to have you here with us. I feel like this conversation is so timely when I think about the SolarWinds cyber attack last year. That was a massive attack. We had a Microsoft Exchange email attack as well. Colonial Pipeline, that was just last month, shutting down the biggest fuel pipeline in the U.S. And then you also had last month JBS's USB plants forced to really shut down. And we also had some international operations of that company impacted as well. It feels like the attacks are getting more severe and more frequent. How would you classify what's happening right now?
Well, Carol, I would agree with you. We're seeing the severity and the scale of the attacks and the frequency dramatically increasing. And if you go back a number of years, we mainly worried about the issue of theft of money, impersonation of identity, theft of intellectual property, espionage. That still continues, but now we are seeing more and more disruptive and destructive attacks, including those that have an effect on critical infrastructure and are really touching people in their everyday lives. So this is clearly increasing as a more serious national security issue.
What are the things that you hear about as you go about work at the Chertoff Group and you work with clients and you're working with government, you're working with companies and institutions? What is it that they're also seeing on a regular basis?
Well, I think the biggest recent story is ransomware, which is, of course, infecting a network with an encryption that locks down all of the data and then saying, if you don't pay me money in Bitcoins, I'm going to throw the key away and you'll never get your data back. And that has the potential to be hugely disruptive. There have been hundreds of attacks on healthcare institutions, and those attacks of ransomware make it impossible to actually carry out necessary medical things. Colonial Pipeline was a ransomware attack. The Brazilian meat company was a ransomware attack. So that is the emerging new threat. But we continue to see the old-fashioned theft of money and identity impersonation as well.
You know, it's interesting, Michael. We've been having a conversation here at Bloomberg on our print side and editorial side about ransomware specifically. Is there a technical solution to ransomware? Specifically, could we do something where security software can detect ransomware as it's being detonated before, it causes all the problems?
Well, in one sense, ransomware is no different than any other attack. You're basically infecting the network in some traditional fashion, whether it's phishing, manipulating people into downloading something, or exploiting a vulnerability in the supply chain like you have with SolarWinds. The only difference is in ransomware, instead of simply stealing data, although they often steal data as well, you're infusing it with the encryption. So the prevention of ransomware is really a species of preventing any kind of attack. But the one difference is this. It's important to have resilience. If you've backed up your data, if the backup data is not accessible over the internet to the ransomware attackers, then it is relatively easy to reconstitute your missing data, and therefore you're not in that much of a bind. If you haven't backed up your data in real time, then it can become absolutely fatal to your business, and that's why people have been paying huge amounts of money.
Are people really backing up their data? You and I, in our prep call for this, we were talking about how companies have been very lean and mean, cutting costs, just in time, just doing things when they need it. And in many ways, Wall Street has certainly applauded that move, and we've seen that play out in the financial markets. But I do wonder, are a lot of companies, institutions, governments really prepared for maybe the cyber attacks to come?
Well, Carol, you're absolutely right. For many years, the mantra in the business community was lean and mean, just in time, don't have any excess capacity. That keeps costs down and it makes us hyper efficient. The flip side of hyper efficiency is you are vulnerable if something happens and now you don't have a plan B. You either don't have an alternative way to carry out your mission, or you don't have an alternative way to store your data. So I do think it's causing businesses and governments to rethink whether they need to build in a margin of safety and a margin of security against the possibility of some kind of a disaster. And by the way, let me say the pandemic has been a lesson in the same principle, that you've got to have a backup plan, because sometimes either Mother Nature or criminals wind up interfering with your plan A.
Well, let's talk about who's actually doing the cyber attacks at this point. We saw the summit between Presidents Biden and Putin, and, Biden pretty much laying out that he understands that there are things going on in Russia that possibly, likely, that the President Putin is aware of. That's part of the problem. Governments know there's stuff going on in their countries, and they're kind of allowing it.
Well, some governments are allowing it. Now, with the Russians, we've seen two types of bad actors. We've seen the SVR, the Russian intelligence service, which was behind the SolarWinds hack into the supply chain. But we've also seen criminal groups, organized criminal groups based in Russia, carrying out attacks in other countries. And essentially, the tacit or even explicit understanding in Russia is, if you're a criminal group, as long as you carry out your crimes outside of Russia's borders, the Russian authorities will leave you alone. And they do that because sometimes they go to these very criminal groups and enlist them to carry out attacks with a national security element. We saw that, for example, in 2007 in Estonia, where criminal groups acting at the behest of Russia attacked the Estonian government and the Estonian financial system. So I think President Biden was quite right to be clear to Putin that we know it's not just the intelligence agencies themselves, but it's the fellow travelers in Russia that are carrying out a lot of these most devastating attacks.
And do you think governments need to be ready to launch attack and a cyber attack back, basically go on offensive if they are attacked?
Well, that raises the critical issue of deterrence. And up to now, we've typically done things like brought criminal cases or imposed sanctions, which have a certain amount of deterrent impact, but not really as much as we need given what's going on now. And therefore, I think we need to get to the point that there is a cyber response when there is an attack. And that may mean disabling the attacker's servers or otherwise interfering with the attacker's conduct of operations. And maybe most important, follow the money. If you can get the money back, that is a major blow to the criminal groups. And one of the great stories out of Colonial Pipeline is the FBI was able to track the cryptocurrencies that were used to pay the ransom and get most of that money back. And if we can do that, that's going to be a major dent into the incentives these groups have.
Yeah, that certainly felt like a game changer, I know, from our perspective and just kind of watching it all happen. What, Michael, can governments do, institutions do, organizations do, governments in particular, to really protect themselves?
Well, we have to be cooperating, and that means we need to give each other information when there is an attack, data about the nature of the attack, and also some help about how do we wind up responding efficiently. Government needs to continue to share and increase the sharing of information, but the private sector needs to be incentivized to do the same as well. In some areas like the energy sector or the financial sector, there actually are regulatory incentives to require sharing. And the Biden administration just issued a new executive order for those dealing with the federal government that requires there be sharing of standards, sharing of information about attacks. And that is a great model for the private sector in general. So I do think the Biden administration has really stepped up now in terms of increasing the way in which we cooperate to defend ourselves and also potentially impose a deterrent effect on bad actors.
Hey, Michael, one last question. Just got under a minute here. Have we seen the worst of it when it comes to cyber attacks? Or are you kind of getting ready for the big one?
I'm afraid we haven't seen the worst. And I think particularly as tensions heat up geopolitically, we may actually see attacks that are direct on critical infrastructure. We've seen Russian reconnaissance on our electric grid. They haven't done anything. But of course, you have to ask, why are they looking? And that's why we need to have the capability to make it clear that a response that causes a loss of life or very serious economic damage will, in our view, be the initiation of a hybrid conflict, and we will respond forcefully and unequivocally.
All right, going to leave it there. Michael, thank you so much. Always appreciate your insight. You are a voice that we lean on when it comes to cybersecurity and security around the world. Michael Chertoff of the Chertoff Group and, of course, former Secretary of Homeland Security. Michael, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Tracy Alloway. I'm an executive editor here at Bloomberg, also the co-host of the Odd Lots podcast. I am very pleased to be introducing our next guest. We have the CEO of the largest crypto exchange in the world. We're going to be speaking with Changpeng Zhao, better known as CZ, of course, the CEO of Binance. CZ, it's lovely to be speaking with you again. We have to start at the obvious point. The big drop in Bitcoin, the big drop in the crypto complex overall. What is going on?
Thanks, Tracy, for having me. So with this, with the price, we don't know what's causing it. There's a lot of news that's going on right now. There's positive news and negative news. There's a China ban Bitcoin again, and then there's the El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as a legal tender. There's a lot of news in between. So it's very hard to tell. From our perspective, we just see people trade or placing orders. So, but if we compare to like a year ago, like the markets are still like 10x bigger, 10x more active, etc. So we think it's still a pretty healthy market.
Definitely a lot bigger than it was 10 years ago, that's for sure. But from your perspective, again, a massive crypto exchange, how significant would it actually be if China were to crack down on crypto in a significant way? There have always been open questions around exactly how much mining is actually in China, what exactly the influence is, how big a deal might it be, and what's your take on how they might go about doing that from a regulatory perspective?
Right. So I think there will be some short-term impact for sure, given that there are a decent number of miners or there were a decent number of miners in China. But no, this is not the first time that China's banned Bitcoin. There's multiple bans throughout the years. In 2013, there was one notice. 2017, there was another notice. And so 2013 was slightly more vague. 2017 was specifically no ICOs in the country and no crypto exchanges in the country. And then now it's like no miners. So it's a stepwise increment, but it's a big country. But then we we've seen previous bans of any country on crypto, like Bitcoin recovers afterwards anyway. So I think short term though, you will have some impact on mining, etc. But we're seeing a lot of those miners moving out of China to other places. There's some of them are sending their miner equipment to overseas. There's big shipments, etc. And Binance run a mining pool, which is around the top 5. And so we see a lot of clients moving around. But the short term, there'll be an impact. Long term, I think we'll be okay.
All right. Speaking of stuff moving overseas, you mentioned a positive catalyst for Bitcoin recently, and that is the adoption by El Salvador of the cryptocurrency. Do you expect similar moves from potentially other countries?
Yes, absolutely. I think I honestly did not expect El Salvador or any one country to move this quickly to force a Bitcoin as a legal tender, meaning forcing all the merchants to accept it as a legal currency. But once one country does it, the race is on. It's a competition. And I think what now people realize is that adopting Bitcoin cryptocurrencies as a legal tender actually makes your local economy stronger. You are less prone to other governments or interventions, etc. And it actually makes your nation more solvent. It actually makes your nation more independent, stronger economy, etc. And there's many small countries that they never aspire to have their currency to be the global dominant currency. Many of them may adopt cryptocurrencies. So I think this will definitely continue.
Another not so good thing that has happened to Bitcoin recently has been Elon Musk's apparent about turn on the technology. He's been tweeting about how Bitcoin actually isn't very environmentally friendly. I know you have responded to some of that criticism on Twitter. Is it now CZ versus Elon Musk when it comes to Bitcoin?
Well, no, it's definitely not CZ versus Elon. Number one, it would not be a fair fight. I wouldn't win. Number two, I think we live in cryptocurrencies, we live in a free world. Anyone can say anything they want, and we live in countries where, in a few countries in the world, there's freedom of speech, and Elon lives in one of those countries. So he's to a large extent free to say what he wants to say, and we, as a community, as the industry, needs to learn how to properly respond to that. Given that he has 57 million followers, he do have quite a bit of influence, and I would actually hope that he realized that he has that influence, and that with that great power, it comes with great responsibilities. I think Elon wants to be a humorous guy, but tweeting, but he has to realize that his tweets do have the power to move markets, and when that happens, people get damaged, etc. So he's got to be a little bit. I would recommend him to be a little bit more careful, but it's his freedom. It's not me against him. I wouldn't recommend doing that, but it's his freedom.
All right, fair enough. I wanted to turn now to finance and your business. Now, recently, your CFO left rather abruptly. There's lots of speculation around that departure. We know that the business is facing several regulatory probes. I know that you can't comment on those due to legal reasons, but what's your response? What would you say to people who are potentially concerned about the CFO leaving unexpectedly in that way?
Right. So Binance as a team has had very little turnover. If you look at the internet startup in the US, in Silicon Valley, 3-4 years in, the founding team would have changed a lot. Binance actually had very low turnover rate at our senior levels. But, we can't, Wei left for personal reasons. He left on very good terms. He contributed to Binance for 3 years. And look, there will be some turnover. We wish him luck, and we want to thank him for his services. So there's not much more I can comment. Like, this things happen. It's not such a big deal.
Okay. Let's turn more broadly and talk a little bit about one of the big developments this year, which has been the rising popularity of DeFi. A lot of really interesting technological developments happening there. How does a centralized exchange like Binance actually compete with a DeFi or decentralized exchange, something like Uniswap, where you can basically go on and start trading without having to deal with a middleman, without, in some cases, even having to enter much personal data? What do you have up your sleeve when it comes to competing with DeFi, and how much competition would you expect that to be?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, we don't view ourselves as competing with decentralized exchanges. Like our centralized exchange, we don't view that as competition. fundamentally, they service two different type of users, actually. The centralized exchanges service users who are more comfortable with the email, password, they're okay with providing the KYC information, etc., and they get customer support if there's an issue. Decentralized platforms like Uniswap, like PancakeSwap, these are sort of they run on smart contracts. It's great, and there's no KYC, as you said, there's no KYC AML information provided, and you have to hold your own keys. If you lose your own keys, you lose your funds, and then no one can help you. So we kind of view those two as very separate products. And instead of us competing with them or fighting with them, we actually want to join the DeFi space. We want to provide more products in the DeFi space. So we want to provide both. So we traditionally, Binance do have a decentralized exchange, which is slightly different from the current DeFi, but we funded, we bootstrapped, we give grants to a number of DeFi projects, including PancakeSwap and other things like that. So we don't view it as competition. We don't view it as fighting. We want to join. We want to promote all of them.
Well, just on that note, I know you have your own smart chain project going on. Yeah. How is that going? And do you have any additional upgrades planned, any other projects when it comes to that?
Right. So the Binance Smart Chain is actually a community project. It uses the Binance brand name. We let people use the Binance name all over the place. We don't really protect it that heavily. As long as it's we think relatively positive for the ecosystem. It is a basically feature similar same to Ethereum, but faster, high capacity. I think my understanding is that project team, that sort of project community is focused on just improving performance, handling more loads. Binance Smart Chain has not really taken users away from Ethereum. The Ethereum guys are still using Ethereum. The Ethereum blockchain, the number of transactions have now dropped. But the Ethereum transaction fees are relatively high, so Binance Smart Chain is much lower cost. So I believe there's a much wider range of people who are now able to or willing to pay like $100 per transactions, and they're now all using Binance Smart Chain. So now we can see the Binance Smart Chain transaction volumes are somewhere between 4 to 7x of Ethereum. So there's actually more users using that. So we see that as a complement. Again, not such direct competition.
Well, there's another project that you are about to roll out, and that has to do with NFTs or non-fungible tokens. What are you planning there, and how difficult, or is it potentially a different type of challenge to roll those type of assets out on a centralized exchange versus something like a cryptocurrency?
Yeah, so NFTs are slightly different than what we typically call cryptocurrency fungible tokens. So basically, you can any one Bitcoin is pretty much the same as the next Bitcoin, whereas NFTs is the one item, the unique. So in terms of that type of behavior, the trading technology involved, it is somewhat different. But I do believe NFTs are unlocking a huge potential in the crypto space. It provides a new way for creators to monetize their work, which wasn't available to creators before. So this is huge. And so in fact, we are rolling out 2 NFT platforms at the same time. One launched last week, one's launching this week. One's centralized, the one last week's decentralized, the one this week is centralized. So we're actually always providing both options to users. We don't know which one will be more popular, but both are bootstrapped and funded by Binance. We'll just see how it goes. We'll let the users choose.
Certainly never a shortage of things going on in crypto world. CZ, the CEO of Binance, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Shonali Bassick, Wall Street correspondent at Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg News. I'm so pleased to be joined today on a panel on the future of fintech by Dame Jayne-Anne Gadhia, the founder of fintech company Snoop, Blythe Masters, the CEO of Motive Partners, which specializes in fintech investing, and Jim Ovia, the founder and chairman of Zenith Bank in Nigeria. Jayne-Anne, I do want to start with you. As a founder of a company, what are some of the challenges in building your own firm?
particularly during a pandemic, I think is a good question. I think, being really clear on where you're going, making sure you've got the right people. I often wondered whether I should bring in sort of new people to this, but I do think, building a team that's worked together before has been very powerful. Putting the customer at the heart of everything, and then choosing technology from the myriad of different opportunities that's going to be sustainable, effective, and deliver on what you really want to, for the future. So I think strong proposition, bringing the team together, being clear on the technology, and then, of course, raising the funding. It's always difficult to get all of those things going with only a few people, but delighted to say that we and so many other fintechs have managed that, and it's very exciting. I advise my daughter, who's just about to go to university, to set up her own business because it's just so fun.
Well, speaking of the funding part of that equation, that's a great place to bring in Blythe. What are your criteria? What are really the things that show you that a business can be cutting edge and really change the trajectory finance is on?
So that's a big question. And I think maybe a place to start is to recognize just the sheer scale of what constitutes the fintech investment opportunity in the years to come. More than 1 in every $4 that are spent on technology are spent on financial technology by both financial firms and non-financial firms seeking to embed financial aspects into the way that they interact with their customer base. That adds up to about a $10 trillion market opportunity. And within that, obviously, there's a whole array of different types of business that are investable, both in the public and in the private markets. Where we focus is in private equity as a growth and buyout stage investment firm. And we really like the kinds of businesses that are infrastructure-like, in that they provide technology that financial services players can use to deliver product to their customers, where that technology is mission critical and has an established path to the provider being profitable and establishing a competitive moat around their business. So it's a combination of looking for both product that has key attributes, as well as key competitive positioning that we like to look at in establishing investment criteria.
So I do want to get into some of these ideas that Jayne-Anne and Blythe had brought up on more specific technologies, because really, it truly is such a broad category at the end of the day. But Jim, I do want to see also first, from a big established bank in Africa, what are some of the opportunities you see in adopting fintech?
Thank you. The opportunities that exist in African continent, particularly Nigeria, being one of the largest economies in Africa, had to do with the large population in Nigeria, about 200 million, and the millennial being able to develop fintech to reach the large population of the millennials is also very important, particularly transactions that had to deal with technology, disseminating through the internet, online transactions, and also disseminating through some of the global brands like MasterCard, and to be able to go to store and merchants. We are one of the largest merchant acquirers in the country today, and that is very pleasing to the millennials. And it's also very important because the millennials really blossom so quickly and so well in the area of fintech technology.
Dame Jayne-Anne, can you talk to us a little about the technology itself? You know, before I became a financial reporter, I was a technology reporter. And it seems to me that the two worlds have had a lot of trouble talking to each other for a very long amount of time. So where are you seeing the biggest ability to bridge that gap?
Oh, I think rather than getting into the specific technologies, because there are a number, as we know, I think that the key for finance firms and technology firms is to realize that the future for financial technology is new. I think that, looking back at the banks that I've worked in previous years, just putting a digital front end onto legacy systems is never going to be the right way forward. I spent an awful lot of time in previous banks trying to work out, for example, how to get a single customer view. And so technology now needs to be, and is of course, flexible, customer driven, easy to support and develop, enables the customer rather than the product to be at the heart of things. And for me, that means, managing a complete transformation of existing companies' tech stacks. And I think that's really is one of the cutting edges of successful fintech for the future. New technology, flexible technology, digitally driven, and with people that are very clear about how to move forward and to build on the innovations that are still to come. So not getting locked in a legacy way, I think, is absolutely critical.
That sounds expensive.
Oh, no, I don't think it is expensive. I mean, the legacy systems are the most expensive, as we know, and particularly the way in which that we can build these days through sprints. I mean, we've built Snoop through fortnightly sprints for the last 15 months. And I think being able to move forward in such a way as to continue to build whilst you're live is the thing that makes this sort of so much more economical than having to build old-fashioned systems, which were, fully tested and therefore took months end to end before they went out to the public. And then you found that you've got problems to deal with. So this sort of iterative approach, I think, means that innovation and efficiency go hand in hand with digital and new technologies.
Blythe, when you're looking at the investment opportunity, what are some of the technologies that excite you the most? Or is there a completely different way you're looking at the atmosphere?
We don't focus on picking and investing in early stage technologies and seeking to bet on who will be the winners and losers. Where we get most excited is where we see a business that has an existing or the potential to grow a network effect, and then to deploy technology to enable the delivery of product through that network that is scalable, has operational leverage, and that can grow by using technology to improve the quality of the product, to change the nature of interaction, to digitize previously manual or paper-based or human-intervened processes, and so on. And what I'm really describing is businesses that have platform-like characteristics, where parts of that network that exists can be brought together in a fashion that is more efficient using an array of different technologies. As you already heard, there are, of course, many technologies which are coming of age as we speak simultaneously with the broader availability of broadband internet connections, the development of cloud services and the reduction in costs associated with compute power and storage that's coming with that, the deployment of machine learning and AI, the development of distributed ledger technology, to enable straight-through processing between multiple independent processes. All of these technologies can coexist, and the fact that they are coming of age at the same time is what makes the opportunity to develop platform-like businesses that connect broad networks so exciting, and particularly so in the context of financial services, which in many respects has lagged behind some of the other big sectors in our economy in terms of the kind of disruption that platform businesses can bring to the space. So over the next 5 to 10 years, we expect to see the development of many fully integrated end-to-end platform businesses that are serving the financial processing space, and that will ultimately link issuers of capital to investors of capital, but in a much more efficient way than the heavily intermediated, heavily manually intervened and paper-based processes that still exist today.
I'm wondering if you have some examples, Blythe, of companies that have mastered this kind of network effect that you're talking about, whether it's in your own portfolio or other examples out there.
Well, I'd say a great example actually is a company whose name I love because it's descriptive and accurate, called InvestCloud, which today is the amalgamation of three prior companies, a front-end business at Fanatics and at InvestCloud, which connects with investment advisors, whether those be private banks, RIAs here in the US, IFAs in Europe, all of those individuals, all of those businesses that connect with individuals in delivering investment products, combined with a third company, Tegra 118, which was a post-trade servicing platform for managed accounts, serving a very significant component of the investment management industry. Brought together under one umbrella of the newly formed InvestCloud, this is now an end-to-end business that serves a high percentage of the investment product manufacturers in the world, and links them to the end distributors in a way that can very materially reduce the cost of distribution for those manufacturers and broaden the array of investment product available to the end distributors who are responsible for advising, investing their end customers. So it's a great example of a platform business serving the investment management and wealth advisory business in an end-to-end way, in a fully cloud native, beautiful user interfaces, digital front end, with APIs, with microservices, very modern infrastructure that really eases the process all the way from manufacturing, post-trade processing, all the way through to distribution to the end investor. Great example of a platform business in the making.
Jim, I'd love to pull you in here because you had already mentioned one big established company like MasterCard, right? But when you look around at the fintech examples around you, what are some interesting examples of newly formed companies that you may be watching for one reason or the other?
Okay. Africa has a total population of over 1.2, 1.3 billion people, out of which over 350 million are unbanked. They do not have bank account. They never step their foot into any bank. So they rely on fintech. They rely on the online payment system through their mobile phone, mobile app, and that is where the fintech blossomed greatly. Hence, a number of fintech companies are doing great in Nigeria and the rest of Africa. In fact, some of the up-and-coming young, new fintech companies, you may have heard of such names as Paga, and you may also have heard about such other names of other fintech companies that have blossomed so well. And one of them is beginning to be a unicorn, almost $1 billion in valuation. Quite a number of young, new fintech companies are coming up that a number of banks are partnering with, collaborating, because they support them in reaching out to the very young and to those who are unbanked. That is why quite a number are doing very well. You have 350 million individuals that do not have any bank account at all. And that's why it's very important for us to partner with them very quickly and very aggressively.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, how fintech might compete with the big existing banks in their current form. What kind of concerns do you have about competition?
Okay, I will probably say the fintech and the banks are participating in a way that I will call co-op competition. While they are collaborating, they are also competing, not competing for different customers, the same customers that they cooperate with, while the bank will perform the overall services. The bank needs a fintech company to bring in the unbanked 350 million persons in Africa, huge number. They bring them to the banking system through the fintech company, who hitherto would not have done any banking transactions at all. and the banking transaction is done through the fintech company. So it is a cooperation, collaboration, and participating for the common good of both the fintech as well as the banks.
What advice, Jayne-Anne, would you have for the banking system to stay on the cutting edge as new players start to emerge? In the U.S., we're seeing a firm like Stripe, for example. You know, the gap between their valuation and Goldman Sachs is less than $40 billion these days, or about $40 billion. So the delta's it's really significantly closing. How do the big banks, the established players, stay ahead?
Oh, I mean, I think they have the challenge, I think, for the big players is that they need to invest in their own existing customer base and technologies, of course, but they need to change. And so managing the transformation to be constantly nimble and innovative, I think, is the biggest challenge. How are they going to do that? Now, when I was leading Virgin Money, which I ran for a number of years, the only way in which we found to do that was to run a parallel banking business. We called it Virgin Money Digital, alongside the legacy bank. And that enabled us to operate in some ways like a fintech, whilst at the same time having the sort of annuity income streams that come from a traditional banking platform. And in my own experience, that's the only way to stay ahead, is to run in parallel and then to move with the sort of people that will come into the digital organizations such as Stripe and others, put that into your digital organization and, as I say, run in parallel with the legacy business.
Blythe, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you also about the potential for distributed ledger and blockchain technology, right? We have seen so many banks so hesitant to adopt cryptocurrencies, but blockchain, we're already seeing a number of deals being done on distributed ledger. So I'm wondering what the future is.
Well, for me, for all of these new technologies, and of course I think of crypto more than anything, I think that it is inevitable and we have to make sure that the banking world is ready for such significant changes. For me, from a crypto point of view, we're going to get there. You know, if you look back over the last, many generations, money has always changed in type and scale and the way in which it's used. And for me, I think crypto is the way ahead. It needs to be properly regulated and existing bankers need to put into how that's going to work. So for everything that's going to change, we need to just accept it, make sure that it's safe, bring in traditional expertise, but look forward, not back.
Blythe, do you have an answer here too for what you're saying?
Yeah, happy to add to that. I agree with the sentiment that it's important to ensure proper regulation of new products, both for the purposes of consumer protection and ultimately systemic stability. There's also often a lot of confusion in this area because of the conflation of cryptocurrencies with blockchain, or perhaps more generically distributed ledger technology known as DLT. And cryptocurrencies are just one application of blockchain technology. There are, and I think that the interest in cryptocurrencies, which is obviously currently being fueled by concerns about inflation and the value of fiat currencies, is an interesting economic debate in its own right, and whether or not one can see cryptocurrencies as an alternative to investments in commodities like gold is certainly driving some of that institutional and retail interest. DLT more broadly actually holds potentially a lot more promise for addressing far less sexy, if you will, use cases that are nonetheless deeply dragging on the performance and the efficacy of financial services for ultimately the end investor and the end issuer. So what I'm referring to is the enormous inefficiencies that arise from the fact that essentially there is this absence of platform-like capabilities in financial services, with the result that the many interested parties in the financial services ecosystem keep their own disparate and inconsistent records of activity, which we then spend billions of dollars and many man and woman hours addressing in terms of reconciling those disparate records during the process of financial processing. And it is that brings you the anomaly that despite the fact that we have the technology today to see self-driving vehicles on the streets, we still can't settle for cash the sale of a common stock in typically less than 2 full business days. The stuff that goes on in the 2 full business days between the trade date and the settlement date on a common stock, it involves a lot of processing inefficiency, manual intervention, potential for error, that distributed ledger technology has the ability to materially improve. And in fact, if you look at some of the more interesting projects around the world, whether it's what DTCC is up to or ASX in Australia, they're exploring, in the case of ASX, actually implementing distributed ledger technology to effectuate settlement and clearing in the cash equities markets in a manner that will eliminate a lot of that post-trade pain in the operational space that adds both cost and risk to the system. So seeing the development of platform businesses where multiple independent parties are able to share a common record of simple financial transactions and be able to independently authenticate and audit those transactions without having to keep their own separate record, which then requires reconciliation, is the promise that distributed ledger technology offers for the financial services space. And that is a more profound change, and it will go further in terms of changing essentially the costs and the wastage in the financial services system than the narrow use case of simply using cryptocurrency as an alternative store of value to something like gold. So I think it's a bigger deal and has much more significant long-term implications.
Jayne-Anne, because you had mentioned the promise of crypto, and we only have about a minute left here, do you think, how are you using it at Snoop?
We're not using it at Snoop at the moment, but we have every expectation that we'll do so in the future. So yeah, I think it's super important, and I suspect in the next decade it will become something that's much more normal for us all to be operating with.
This was such a great panel. I thank all of you so much for your time, and looking forward to seeing what happens next in this future of fintech, what happens in terms of allocating more money to more people and all the new technologies that we'll use. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Sonali Basak, Wall Street correspondent for Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg News. I'm excited to be joined today by Michael Novogratz, the CEO of Galaxy Digital, and Dan Moorhead, the CEO of Pantera. Both of you have been a part of the traditional hedge fund industry for such a long time, and were really early adopters when it came to crypto. Help us think about how to look at crypto from a more macro perspective, as we're so worried about inflation, especially here in the US, and the calculus on interest rates is just not the same as it used to be. Dan, maybe you can get us started on that thinking.
Sure. So, Mike and I have been very bullish on crypto for 8 years, but the response from the monetary authorities to the pandemic has been literally off the charts. And that's adding huge impetus to the value of things whose quantity can't be eased. And crypto is obviously one of the best performers. And the easiest way to think about it is last June, the United States started printing more money each month than it did in the first 200 years of the country's existence. That's putting enormous pressure on everything: stocks, lumber, Bitcoin, Ethereum. And so from a macro perspective, this is a very clear case of incredible amounts of money supply fueling inflation and things whose quantity can't be eased.
Mike, do you have a way to think about this from a more macro perspective on where Bitcoin should be fitting into portfolios?
Yeah, listen, I think, both domestically here in the US and globally, you're seeing central banks and treasury departments, Ministry of Finance in some places, collude to print more and more money. And so you want to be long hard assets. So you've got hard assets, real estate's a hard asset, gold is a hard asset, stocks can be hard assets, and certainly crypto. And so I look at Bitcoin in particular as digital gold. And so if you're going to be long gold, Bitcoin's a better version because it's got the same macro tailwinds, but it's also very early in the adoption curve, right? People were scared of Bitcoin a few years ago. They've moved into the space, and now hedge funds are okay with it. Real money managers are okay with it. Insurance companies are okay with it. And so you're playing an adoption game and you're playing a macro game. And so I'm still a big buyer of Bitcoin. The rest of crypto is a giant venture bet, right? Ethereum and the Ethereum-like tokens, DeFi, NFTs, all really part of a new future that's happening. And so that's a separate bet. It benefits from Bitcoin's tailwind, but it also benefits in that we're building this new architecture for the financial world that's going to be more egalitarian, more transparent, more efficient, and more fair. And you can see Gen Z and millennials moving towards crypto, but you can see the whole world now looking at it.
I'm glad you already brought in, and we'll get to that in a second too. I'm just really glad you brought in the definition of cryptocurrency here beyond Bitcoin, because everyone knows now generally what Bitcoin is. I think people are less familiar with the other tokens and the other ways that it's used. Dan, how are you trading it beyond Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's a great point that for a long time, Bitcoin kind of was enough. It was the majority of the market. And so it really did approximate the industry. Now there are literally hundreds of tokens that are liquid enough to trade that have all kinds of different use cases. And Mike called Bitcoin digital gold. That's a great analog. Ethereum allows programmable money and then tokens to be built on top of Ethereum or Polkadot that allow decentralized finance and all these really cool applications that are coming. A really important way to think about it is if you're just long Bitcoin, it's kind of like in the 90s being just long Yahoo. You know, there were 30 other really important companies to invest in the 90s. And the same here, there are a lot of different products to be invested in. And a good example would be this year, Bitcoin is up 34%. Our hedge fund that trades the liquid tokens is up 240%. So, you know, there's 180 percentage points of alpha in investing in things that aren't Bitcoin.
What are some of those things before we get to Mike's paper here?
So obviously Ethereum's the second biggest. It's very important. It allows programmable money. You can do smart contracts, all kinds of really interesting things on it. Then, as Mike said, there are kind of newer versions of Ethereum. We're big investors in Polkadot, which is kind of a newer version of Ethereum. And then there's all kinds of tokens built on top of protocols like that. Like a cool one is Audius. It's a decentralized sound cloud. And it's a great way to show what the disruption that blockchain's bringing. It's taking these very expensive middlemen like Spotify or SoundCloud out of the middle and allowing consumers to interact directly with the producers of content, and both sides get a much better experience.
Mike, broaden the lens for us here. How are you trading beyond Bitcoin, and what are you finding as far as research goes into this broadening universe? I know you've recently hired a new head of research as you build Galaxy as well.
Yeah, listen, it's, you know, for the general user of crypto, Bitcoin and Ethereum is probably enough. If you want to dig in and you want to become more professional, or you want to, you know, potentially have more money, a lot of the early stage venture bets. So we have a venture fund. Dan's got a venture fund. You're betting on these early protocols, or then new tokens, right? And so it takes homework. We're big buyers of the Luna ecosystem. There's a guy named Do Kwon. He's a Stanford grad from Korea who built a payments app originally called the Chai Payments app, where now 1 out of 8 payments, 8% of all payments in Korea are happening on Chai. The Chai Payments app runs on the Terra blockchain. So Terra is a form of Ethereum. It's less decentralized, it's faster. And a lot of the value accrues to what's called the Luna token. And so it gets complicated for people, but that's really where the frontier is. And so we've got big positions in lots of tokens like that. I would caution the retail investor or the investor that's not diving in. You get a lot of that juice by playing on Ethereum. If Ethereum goes up, these other tokens are going to go up. They might go up more if you get in early, but it takes a lot more work to understand which ones to play. We're building a whole research team to try to give both institutional clients and at times all clients some guidance on what we think are the hot tokens. Crypto still lives on Twitter. And so you can get a tremendous amount of information, good and bad, on Twitter. So you really need to curate who you listen to. It's very tribal as well, right? Each of these ecosystems has their own identity, and it has their own sense of purpose. You know, what Bitcoin did in a brilliant way is it made this idea of a community that gets around a digitally scarce asset viable. But we used to have communities that get around assets like Picasso's, right? How many people do you think can buy a Picasso painting? There are probably 20,000 in the world that care about it. And there's gallerists and dealers and museums that tell the Picasso story. And then people best value.
Mike, I want to start talking about kind of where this goes from here, because people look at DeFi, right? Decentralized finance. And some say that it can really replace the banking system one day. Dan, I'd love your thoughts on this too, because do you think that there's a reality that this new ecosystem can replace the financial system as we know it? And if so, what time horizon does that happen on?
I do think it'll build a parallel financial system. And if you think about it, all the other protocols of the internet, they've revolutionized everything else in our lives, commerce, communication, all that. They really didn't touch finance. Banks are pretty much the same as they were. Credit card companies still charge what they did, decades ago. Remittance companies still charge migrants a month's wages to send money back to their home countries. Those will all be changed by blockchain. And DeFi is one of the current applications that's really taking off. It's connecting borrowers and lenders without an expensive bank in the middle. It's connecting people who want to sell an asset with people that want to buy an asset. And we've been investing in space for years, and we're really excited that DeFi has gotten up to $60 billion of outstanding borrowing and lending. But to put that in perspective, there's 100 trillion of bonds, right? So we're really at the beginning of what I think is a multi-decade trade here.
Mike, maybe you can weigh in on your perspective here and balance it with maybe some of the major hiccups we've seen in the DeFi market. You see even really experienced investors like Mark Cuban trading tokens that are going to zero.
Yeah, listen, you need to do your homework. So one of the things that's unique about DeFi is how fast it can build communities. You know, something like Bitcoin, it had tons of developers poking holes at it and poking holes at it and poking holes at it. And it really became a fortified piece of code before it was ready for prime time. Some of these DeFi protocols show up and they haven't become as vibrant, as resilient because they're brand new. And so you've got to be careful on the brand new protocols that the coders, the community, right, this decentralized program actually works. I think DeFi's got a big future. The big thing that's stopped institutions, even institutions like Galaxy from using it, has been, do I know who's on the other side of a smart contract, right? When I trade as a regulated entity, I need to know that who I'm trading with has been KYC'd, AML, right? That they're not a bad actor. And there's lots of protocols now that as soon as that piece is fixed are going to explode. And I would tell you, we are getting close ourselves at Galaxy from having a fix to that. There are lots of other people that are working on it. Imagine like a blue check at Twitter that I know, even though I don't know who I'm trading with, I know that they've been KYC'd by someone credible. And the moment that gets fixed, there's nothing left to regulate in DeFi. And so you're going to see this peer-to-peer exchanges, peer-to-peer insurance companies, peer-to-peer fixed income businesses really explode. And so I think if I was a bank, I'd be very focused. And I would tell you, I did a big presentation to one of the biggest banks in the world yesterday with their top 50 people at the bank just on this. They're thinking, how do we approach this? How do we get ourselves ready for it? Do we participate? Do we lobby against it? And so the next 12 months, you're going to hear a lot about DeFi.
There's so much to ask about that lobbying against it, because we are feeling that threat from the financial players, the traditional ones. But I've got to ask before we leave, you guys, we have the benefit of having such a global audience. is there any country that is more advanced when it comes to crypto innovation? And where does the US stand in that calculus as it considers its own restrictions and regulations on the industry? Dan, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, there are a few countries like Luxembourg or Switzerland that are progressive in trying to establish a blockchain industry there. And the US used to have a dramatic lead here. And we just updated some stats on our own portfolio. And in the first 6 years, 65% of our investments were in the United States. And in the last 18 months, that's fallen to only 42%. So from a US perspective, it'd be great to provide more clarity on regulation, to encourage this obviously very important industry to develop in the United States rather than outside.
Mike, where's the crypto leader in your perspective?
Listen, what's interesting is crypto is global. And so Bitcoin is traded in every country in the world, right? In every village, there's someone telling the Bitcoin story. And so we don't, in general, most of our financial markets are local, right? The US bond market, the Europeans got its own markets, Japan has its own equity market. And so crypto really is the first global market. And so when you're working on these protocols, if it's Uniswap, that's a decentralized exchange, you have a global audience. And so it's fascinating how fast they can grow. A lot of the human capital that's building these protocols is still coming out of the US. A lot of the usage of this and a lot of the new ecosystems are showing up outside of the US, and that's because of lack of clarity of regulation, or just the fact that there is regulation. And listen, I think Gary Gensler is going to be a great head of the SEC for crypto. It doesn't mean he's not going to regulate. He is going to regulate. I think he's going to do things that I'd do if I was there, to try to make the rules clearer for people, to try to look at things that feel really, really risky and say, hey, these things are really, really risky. We don't want, you know, lending companies to be 100-to-1 leverage, just like we don't want banks to be 100-to-1 leverage. So
while we think about regulation also, I mean, there's also this great tension between central banking rather than regulation and currencies. Do you think there will be a cryptocurrency that overtakes a traditional currency? And if so, where?
Listen, I think central banks all are looking at a digital version of their own currency, right? We call them stable coins or central bank issued digital currencies. With 100% certainty, I think you're going to see those out of most major central banks in the next 5 years. Some will be, like I think in the US, private stable coins that are regulated by the Fed, where the deposits for that stable coin are held at a Fed institution. Some will be centralized, like in China. And so I think you're going to see payments, a huge revolution in payments, go towards a crypto world, right? A blockchain-based world. And so you're going to see a monster revolution there. We will see more adoption of things like Bitcoin or Dogecoin, if that becomes your coin, if central banks and treasuries do a terrible job at what they're doing. Right now, people in the West are buying Bitcoin not because they think we're going to become Venezuela, our currency is going to become, you know, toilet paper. That's not why. They think the possibility of a slower a faster paced debasement is going to happen, right? Dan will tell you that a British pound sterling, you used to get a full pound of sterling for a pound, right? Now it costs how much, Dan, to buy a pound?
It's 184
Dan,
pounds.
I do want to bring you in. What do you think about this idea of crypto versus currency?
Yeah, I think the thing to remember is there are already 200 currencies on Earth. Bitcoin's just number 201, right? And so I don't think it's going to replace the US dollar. But like Mike said, the Venezuelan bolivar, you know, could be replaced in our lifetimes by a cryptocurrency. You'll just see it as a complementary payment rail. Yeah, so you know, that's the way to think about it.
In some ways, crypto is a necessity in the developing markets, right? It's a luxury in the developed markets. It's a necessity in markets where you've got currencies that devalue 15, 20, 25, 30% every year. And so, you know, for the emerging markets, Bitcoin really is a human right.
very excited to be continuing this conversation with both of you for the years to come. Mike Novogratz of Galaxy Digital and Dan Moorhead of Pantera Capital, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Sonali.
Thank you.
Our daily experiences tell the story. Machines are getting smarter, taking over more of our lives and invading our once sacrosanct personal space. When algorithms rule, choice becomes outsourced. Is technology changing from being a tool to become the master? The debate rages. I'm Zane Börje. Our next session will be on power and trade flows. We'll be speaking to the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, about navigating the vaccine patent waiver debate. Asante sana. Thank you.
Thank you.